OMNI, the real E.T. S.E.T.I, search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
People ask me where and when I was born. I usually lie and say that I was born in London in 1921. The truth is, I was born nearly 18 billion years ago in the bursting center of a dying star, and so were you. Hello, I'm Peter Ustinov. Most scientists today agree that the elements which make up our bodies, our world, our universe, were first scattered through the cosmos billions of years ago, following the explosion, the so-called Big Bang, of a massive cloud of star matter. Oh, day and night? But this is wondrous strange. It was 400 years ago when William Shakespeare wrote those lines for Horatio, and Hamlet's reply, "There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy." In the next few minutes, I'm going to take you into the world of the immediate future. A world where science fiction becomes fact, where people prepare to communicate with extraterrestrial life.
Buongiorno. Hello from planet Earth. Guten Tag. Bonjour tout le monde.
This message on board Voyager 1 is a greeting from Earth to our interstellar neighbors. Are they listening? Or are we really alone? Could it be that among the trillions of stars we are the only intelligent civilization? Most astronomers think not.
My own feeling is we will start communicating with other intelligences in the universe, perhaps in 50 years. I think that's really perhaps the most exciting of all astronomers' wishes, perhaps the ones they don't talk about very much because they might get laughed at by their colleagues. But we all naturally are quite certain there's billions of people living out there of all different shapes, forms, and intelligence. And we all secretly hope that we will be able to contact them.
In 1974, a powerful signal was sent into space, deliberately, hopefully, in search of extraterrestrial intelligent life. It came from the largest single telescope in Arecibo.
Well, this is Arecibo, the world's largest dish-type radio telescope, set in the lush green valleys of Puerto Rico in the Caribbean. Well, for some years now, the telescope, which is operated by Cornell University under a contract to the American National Science Foundation, has been studying natural radio emissions from various parts of the solar system, as well as from more distant points in the galaxy and far beyond, from the remotest corners of the known universe. The signals they're receiving at the moment are part of a monitoring program called S.E.T.I, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Although there's been nothing this or other sophisticated monitors have picked up so far to indicate life on other planets, many scientists feel sure it not only does or has existed in other parts of the universe, but that our own destiny, the destiny of the human race, lies out there.
The question of intelligent life in outer space is the great unanswered problem of science, I think. I mean, there's been tremendous debate on it. We don't know the answers. It's become like a theological argument now. And the scientists are polarizing. One group says, well, obviously there's a great deal of life and intelligence in the universe. Another minority group, but I think it's probably growing, saying that, no, we may be the only intelligence in the whole cosmos. But either idea, of course, is fantastic.
Scientists use this rather formidable-looking formula, which includes such things as the rate stars form in our galaxy, the number of stars having planets, and the fraction of planets on which life could start, to estimate the number of probable technological civilizations in the galaxy. Current thinking puts it around 1 for every million stars in the galaxy. But as there are some 200 billion stars in the Milky Way alone, that means a possible 200,000 other civilizations.
At this moment, the vast reaches of intergalactic space could well be filled with communication signals, signals originating in the far corners of the universe, signals that we still cannot hear. But when we do, will we be able to penetrate the language codes now beyond our comprehension?
And what about the UFO sightings reported since the 40s? By now, a startling number of people claim to have seen flying saucers. Hundreds more were terrified when abducted by little aliens. They all described the same gray-skinned, 3-foot-high creatures with huge black eyes. And while aboard, many recall medical examinations. In 1952, this Air Force pilot chased an unidentified object too high, crashed, and was killed. But the Air Force has investigated extensively the Project Blue Book and declared no evidence. Recently, another horrifying close encounter. This young man, Travis Walton, driving home with 6 fellow lumberjacks in Arizona, saw a glowing paneled object. When he investigated, his hysterical companions saw him zapped and lifted by a flash of light to disappear with a UFO. Missing 5 days. When found, he remembered a painful exam and drew the same chalky, enormous-eyed little being. Is this mere coincidence, conspiracy, or communications from out there?
The 1920s, the Charleston era. A group of scientists at the Bell Laboratories in New Jersey were working on transatlantic radio telephone circuits. They were trying to work out what caused the static that disrupted so many calls. Bell Labs assigned one of its young staff members, Carl Jansky, to the problem. Jansky built a directional antenna, an eccentric combination of timber and hardware. He mounted it on 4 rubber tires so it could rotate. The contraption made a complete scan of the horizon every 20 minutes. Jansky found that electrical storms caused most of the static, but there was one steady hiss that he couldn't identify with storms. When he looked back at his records, he realized that the hiss started a little earlier every morning. It was moving with the constellations. It belonged to the distant sky. Jansky had located the first extraterrestrial radio source.
Since he worked for Bell Telephone, no wonder E.T. had to phone home. The first telescopes from the 17th century were optical, of course. Today, they can see infinitely farther.
In the past, we could climb to the top of the tallest mountain, set up a telescope, and study our nearest star. Today, we can take our telescope right to the very edge of space, where the air is so much thinner and the view incomparably better. If I told you that you're looking at a telescope, would you believe me? Well, please believe me. It has been called a telescope with wings, a complete astronomical observatory operated by NASA, which flies among the eaves of the Earth's atmosphere to bring us information we've never been able to acquire before. The heart of the observatory is this 36-inch reflecting telescope that's held steady as a rock in flight by computers and by bearings that float it on a stream of compressed air.
Okay, now general procedures once again, for those who've flown many times, remind you again, be sure you take your oxygen mask with you. The first thing to do when you get on the airplane is to connect it and check it out.
Today's flight is taking off to study our nearest star, the sun. This trip will focus on the chromosphere, a thin layer above the visible surface of the sun that we know little about. We do know that the chromosphere emits intense infrared radiation, and that instruments on Earth pick up nothing of this because the water vapor in our atmosphere screens it out. But when this unique flying telescope soars 8 miles high, above 99% of the water vapor, a whole new world opens up.
Well, boys, we still got the problem.
What?
We still got the problem. Yeah, that's right. We still have the beam, the big feature, so... Let's set up to do another one. All right. And just start again. Not yet. Not yet. Okay, are we ready, Mike? Okay, now that should put you, 3 radii to the right, 1 radius up. Right. And that's back to 0.3 in both axes. Okay, are we ready to try that? I'm ready. Okay, go ahead.
Dr. Eric Becklin, infrared astronomer.
We could find something totally unexpected in which will just change people's theory on the upper atmosphere of the sun. This is a wavelength region at a resolution that no one has looked before, and it could just change how we view the sun.
Dr. Michael Werner from NASA.
One is the part of the sun that we're exploring is the region where the energy is pumped up from inside the sun out into the corona, and it's the corona that produces the solar wind, which influences our communications and our climate here on Earth. So it's possible that we may learn something important helping to understand those processes.
This is the only instrument at this time that can do this experiment.
These scientists are, in their own way, pioneers, often working with instruments they've designed and built themselves.
That's the center of the sun.
All right, fine. Well, let's ascribe a reason for that now. The reason was we screwed it up, okay? Charlie, when this scan is finished, abort it, tell me that.
Let's get ready to go. You know, we have only about 3... Don't worry about it.
Just keep going.
Okay. We'll just start
We'll
the
just
scan
take the beginning of it again.
Okay. Is it, okay?
Go again.
Stand by to mark.
Good work, Ian.
Yeah, very nice.
What's the scan number there?
This is 16, Mike.
Okay.
Mark.
All right. This raster routine is really pretty striking.
Yeah.
Now that it's far above the water shield in the Earth's atmosphere, the telescope receives infrared radiation from the sun that no telescope on Earth has ever seen. New information shows us that the infrared sun is actually larger than the sun that's visible to the human eye.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it looks really odd.
Hey, what's that? Oh, that's the filter. Good.
There it is.
There it is.
Just give me a second. Don't get
This is going to be very tricky.
This is really good data.
So this seems to be working fairly well.
This is very good. Very good indeed. These are
There's another scan
exactly what we want. Good.
Another scan with an inflection into it.
Oh boy, I'll say. Holy moly. This has been very exciting. We knew because whenever you go into a new wavelength region, say angular resolutions, you always find out something new. So we're very excited about these results.
Such flights renew our perspective and constantly redefine the delicate balance which exists in nature. Now, that's one way to study our nearest star. In the future, we may shed even more light on our sun.
The other way to study stars is listening, not looking.
Towards the end of 1984, in Southern California's Mojave Desert, the 26-meter Goldstone radio telescope, operated by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory as part of NASA's Deep Space Tracking Network, was hooked up to a new kind of radio receiver, the most sophisticated apparatus for receiving, analyzing, and processing radio signals ever built. It could monitor 74,000 separate narrow-frequency channels of the radio spectrum simultaneously. Linking many of these new multi-channel spectrum analyzers together through a powerful computer in the future will produce the effect of monitoring up to 8 million radio channels at once. It will have the ability to not only separate the cacophony of radio noise that emanates from all parts of our Milky Way galaxy, but to listen specifically for one which might indicate that it was a signal generated by an intelligent life form.
Well, the chances of hearing anything soon are remote, but the spirit of the whole search is to, of course, find out that first bit of information. We can't communicate because, let's say they're 1,000 light years away or 10,000 light years away. It would take 20,000 years to have a conversation. It's a little too long. So instead, they're going to broadcast that signal. Number one, that will teach us that someone else is there. And number two, they will probably send information from a civilization which is thousands of years more advanced. What an opportunity for the human species.
I think it is that drive to know what's on the other side of a hill that is going to take us not only into the near reaches of space, but to the far reaches of the solar system and even across the interstellar deep to nearby stars, to distant stars, and even across the whole span of the galaxy.
Is the human species a single planet species, or are we a multi-planet? Can we make it anywhere else? Are we on Earth forever, or is this the transition to going elsewhere in the solar system and peopling ourselves in other places?
And what's probably more important, do we have any choice? By 2035, the world's population will be around 10 billion. By 2060, approaching 13 billion. That's more than 3 times our present population. This enormous population growth and our profligate use of the world's finite resources will, according to an increasing number of scientists, force us to look outwards into space as the only viable means of widening our horizons, creating genuine progress, and improving the quality of life for hundreds of millions of people in the underdeveloped countries.
Now that we've begun to run out of natural resources here on Earth, it's time for us to turn our attention to the vast reaches of space. In the old days, prospectors rode out to their claims on mules, but in the near future, they'll be riding to the planets on space shuttles like this one.
Tonight, I am directing NASA to develop a permanently manned space station and to do it within a decade.
The space station is just the beginning of the journey to the stars. First stop on the highway to space will be the moon.
I expect to see the first human outpost permanently established on the moon about 2005. I think 10 years later, we'll open the first human outpost on the surface of Mars, about 2015.
The trip to the moon will begin with the aerospace plane, a ride from Earth up to the spaceport. From the spaceport, a ride in the space tug to the moon.
You will go first to a lunar astronaut outpost, where men and women will be doing scientific research. About a decade or so later, it will be a large, thriving industrial enterprise, highly roboticized.
Ever since we saw our astronauts frolicking on the moon, space enthusiasts have pushed for a permanently manned lunar base.
We never should have left the moon. We should have been there developing the things that we are only now starting to talk about developing, like mass drivers for moving materials off the moon into space and so on.
The concept of mining the moon is now regarded as quite feasible. The lunar materials would be launched from the surface of the moon towards the space colony solar satellite complex by a device called a mass driver, an electromagnetic accelerator working like a catapult against the moon's weak gravity to shoot pellets of material out into space. By the time it reached the end of its long trajectory, gravitational forces would have taken up almost 99% of the momentum of the tennis ball-sized projectiles of lunar material, so they could be easily caught by a huge net-like collector. Large-scale space processing plants would be used in conjunction with the mass driver system to build the space colonies. These enormous structures, gaining all of their energy from the sun, would be totally self-contained, producing their own air, water, and food in huge agricultural areas which would also contain farm animals. The virtually Earth-like environment of a larger settlement would be home to between 10 and 50,000 people.
The size of a modest town is just about perfect from a technical point of view for space colonies, and that also conveniently enough happens to be a size where we've proven through human history that we can get along with each other pretty well.
Even though the space station may be only 500 kilometers above the Earth's surface, compared to 300,000 kilometers from the moon, bringing liquid oxygen from the moon would still be cheaper than from Earth, because of the enormous gravity factor which cargo from Earth has to overcome to get into space. Not much more than 1% of the shuttle's takeoff weight reaches orbit as effective payload, whereas with cargo from the moon, some 50% of the actual takeoff mass can be payload.
Beyond the moon, Mars.
We have on the surface of Mars all the things you need to sustain life, all of the gases, all of the organic materials, all of the water. The journey out to Mars is going to be a fascinating journey indeed. Mars is going to take us about 6 months at the very best, and might even take as long as a year to get there. Begin at the same spaceport Earth that you used to go to the moon, but from there you journey on out to the L1 libration point, a low energy point in the Earth-Moon system. And at that point, you would get into a very high-speed taxi kind of vehicle, and with a great spurt of energy, you would rendezvous with an enormous spaceship that is cycling continuously back and forth between the orbit of Earth and the orbit of Mars. The next 6 months, you would be living aboard an artificial gravity, closed ecology, life support system vessel. It would be very much like an oceanographic vessel on Earth. When you reach Mars, you will get back into your high-speed taxi, and you will leave the cycling spaceship and move on into the orbiting spaceport around Mars, or more likely dock to the Martian moon Phobos, which we believe may be a treasure trove of resources.
And these resources no doubt attract the Russians, who are far advanced in planning a trip to the Martian moon and have invited us to join them on this historic voyage.
There is a group of inspired scientists at work today who intend to turn Mars into a green and living land, a new Earth, a planet where people can live and work in comfort. This plan involves some of the boldest thinking in the history of science. By comparison, it's not unlike a colony of ants in the Australian outback deciding to rebuild the Roman Empire in the Mojave Desert, if you can imagine such a thing. But the technology is already in place, and in the near future, human beings may well be walking around on Mars in their shirt sleeves. How did life on Earth begin? What combination of divine intervention and scientific event explains the fact that the only planet in this solar system known to support life is our own? What about Mars, the red planet? It has neither enough air nor enough water to support human life. A human body placed on Mars today would immediately drown in its own water vapors. Death would be instantaneous. The ice-cold environment would freeze the body within minutes and mummify it for centuries. In spite of this, Mars has already been chosen as the best candidate for our grandest experiment, the creation of a new Earth. Chris McKay, a spokesman for the Mars Study Project at the University of Colorado.
Terraforming, or planetary ecosynthesis, means, in a sense, to alter the climate or conditions on a planet. And in a sense, it would be akin to evolution on Earth.
Once our own planet was as ruthlessly opposed to life as any Martian terrain, but time changed all that. Through millions of years of evolution, the tiniest seeds of life grew into a multitude of species. Today, scientists want to use man-made evolution to grow a new Earth on Mars.
Lichens grow in environments which are not that much different from Mars. As a matter of fact, one of the areas of research that we're interested in is lichens growing in the dry valleys of Antarctica.
This region of Antarctica is not unlike a cold Martian desert. When first discovered, the dry valleys showed no sign of life.
One way to go about the research, in particular studying the organisms which would be required, is to simulate Mars in conditions in a jar, Mars jars.
First, Petri dishes with test microbes are put into the so-called Mars jar. Then all of the Earth's air is removed. McKay is looking for the organisms that can begin the terraforming process on Mars. These tiny white colonies of bacteria, nurtured for weeks in McKay's Mars jars, might do equally well on Mars itself. Russian research supports McKay's findings. Scientists there have, in a simulated Martian environment, kept ants and several other species of insects alive for weeks, and grains such as oat and rye for months, although they became sterile. But there is yet another critical problem: water. Volcanic eruptions were probably the original source of water on Mars. With each eruption of lava, water vapor is spewed into the atmosphere. And it is water which is necessary for life. Before the first Mars landing, scientists speculated about what life might be like without liquid water. They thought that life forms on Mars could have evolved in peculiar ways. For instance, silicone shells for protection from radiation, or peculiar tubular ones, or strange leaf-like plants of unusual colors. Or an ice eater with fine root-like tendrils searching the permafrost for that frozen water. Even more bizarre, a rock eater, a huge sprawling organism that digests the water and spits out the rock.
To make the red planet turn green, we must learn to grow food there in a farm with no gravity.
Comprehensive experiments have been carried out to test the ability of food plants to grow in artificial gravity and artificial light, both for space settlements and for the long interplanetary journeys required to reach Mars. At the Epcot Center in Florida and the Kennedy Space Flight Center at Cape Canaveral, researchers at NASA's Biological Science Division have developed a system of confusing plants about gravity so that they grow horizontally instead of vertically.
The product that Mars really has is scientific knowledge. What we'll learn about planets in general, about Earth, about the origins of life and the role that the solar system played in the origins of life. That's really the product, is scientific knowledge.
And that knowledge is what will make possible the eventual expansion of the human race into the remotest corners of the galaxy.
When we want to trek out to visit the stars, what kind of ship will explore this vast black ocean?
This may all sound like science fiction, but there is science without fiction to back it up. One of the earliest and most viable designs for a starship has been the British project called Daedalus, which would get us into space by a series of small nuclear explosions. The physics and the engineering are already within our grasp. One promising American design comes from Dr. Forward, a laser sail.
The reason I dreamed this up is I was writing a science fiction novel, which won't be out till next year. But in that novel, I wanted to find a way to get my people to the stars in a scientifically accurate way. This laser sail would be 300 miles across and would carry a payload on the back. In fact, the payload would be so small you couldn't see it. After all, this is 300 miles across. Even a very large building would be lost in this sea of aluminum. The way we build this out in space would be to take a very thin plastic sheet and spray on it a very thin layer of aluminum using a robot machine, probably, that just evaporates the aluminum on. The plastic is chosen so that after a week or so, it evaporates away in space, leaving just the film. The sail, once it got up to speed, would then travel to the nearest stars, let's say Alpha Centauri.
What will it look like to go through space at close to the speed of light?
At these speeds, the major effect that we'll see are the color changes. As it traveled out towards Alpha Centauri, the light would slowly change color. The energy in that sail that you put in with the laser beams is more energy than would be produced on the Earth in a whole year. The power required for the lasers would be 5 to 10 times the total power output of the entire world, not just electricity, but coal and oil and even wood. Once we've been around the world a few times, we realized that there wasn't any new place to go, and the only place we could go is out. It's the new frontier.
As we move into the space age, it's interesting to consider the kinds of commercial ventures people will soon be setting up around the solar system. Although cigar stores on Mercury and hamburger stands on Mars are probably, should I say, hopefully a long way off, human beings are even now beginning to explore the enormous commercial possibilities of space. Our own galaxy, the Milky Way, is 100,000 light years across, and spread over that vast expanse, are literally billions of heavenly bodies bursting with ores, minerals, and other precious resources. Locating those resources and converting them to human use may turn out to be one of the boldest commercial ventures in the history of the human race.
One of the first commercial ventures will certainly be tourism. People on space stations also need new places to go on vacation.
And now we'd like to take you into the future and show you what a trip round our solar system might be like, 100 years from now. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can you all hear me at the back? Good. We've just left Alpha 4 Interplanetary Spaceport to begin our nostalgic tour of the solar system. I'm your OMNI tour guide. The moon was man's first step into space. The record of that step remains forever etched in moon dust, for no wind or water will ever wash it away. The far side of the moon has become an astronomer's dream. In an environment free of atmosphere, radio telescopes probe the very limits of the universe. On to Venus, the morning star. Pioneer probes from last century's exploration. We discovered boiling sulfurous clouds laced with light. Our probes landed on a surface hot enough to melt lead. Visions of hell and damnation. No, lady, that's not a quote. I made that up. Plans are now underway to convert the atmosphere and build an Earth colony on Venus. Quite some traffic tonight. It must be Friday night up here. Oh, Mercury, child of the sun. Hot, desolate, its year is 88 days long. But the sun only rises twice each year. Far beneath the surface, our huge industrial robots are silently mining the incredible mineral wealth. First discovered by Mariner, you're quite right, in the last century. Here comes Mars. First explored in the last century by Viking and Mariner again, quite right. Olympus Mons, 3 times the height of Mount Everest. A canyon as long as North America is wide. A favorite tourist spot, the fabulous domed city of Bradburyville. As we leave Mars, we can see that same enigmatic face staring at us. We're now passing through the asteroid belt. No, please don't worry. Our shields are up. And there is, yes, giant Jupiter, which the fragile Galileo probe first visited in the 1990s, passing through its delicate ring of microscopic dust, sampling its gaseous surface. The great red spot, larger than the Earth, an awesome hurricane storming for centuries. Next, Saturn, jewel of the solar system. First visited by ancient Voyager. Right. The mysterious frozen world of Uranus. Neptune. Now we are nearly 3 billion miles from Earth, hurtling past the last of the giant planets with its frigid seas of liquid hydrogen. Pluto,
From here, the sun appears a flat, dim disk in the frozen sky. As we turn back to Earth, we leave behind limitless worlds of resources, adventure, and endless possibilities. Kindly remember the guide as you leave. Thank you.
The whole story of human civilization has been one of exploration and discovery, and that's what's made us what we are. And if we stayed in one place, we'd have probably become extinct. We have to go out into the universe to open up other possibilities, to get round the barriers to growth which exist on this Earth.
The second is the overall safety of the human race. I think it's very important that we be outside this nuclear-filled pressure cooker that we're in, and we get people out and living far away and dispersed from the Earth so that no single catastrophe could wipe out the human race.
There are many reasons why we should spread ourselves, at least over the solar system, occupy the whole of solar space, and develop new cultures, new societies, enrich the human species.
Leaving this planet to explore the universe is as important in the evolution of mankind as our progress from sea to land was millions of years ago.